Hey everybody, it's Mike Guglielmi from Sons of a Pitch, an American soccer podcast, here to bring you the Minnesota United 2020 MLS season preview. This is the last season preview that we will be conducting here at Sons of a Pitch Soccer. So what do they say? Save the best for last. Minnesota United has a spot near and dear to my heart. I really root for MNUFC every chance I get. I really like the Loons, and I like the way that they've come into this league. And really, the fans and the atmosphere there at Allianz Field is just special. Really would like to get up for a road trip. Maybe this is the year that we get up and do a road trip in Minnesota. Let's talk a little bit about the 2019 season and kind of how that ended up. Finished the MLS regular season with 53 points. That was good enough for fourth in the West. To be able to snatch that last home playoff game, unfortunately, it didn't work for Minnesota in that first round playoff game. They ran into a guy called Zlatan Ibrahimovic and the LA Galaxy, and unfortunately they were eliminated from the playoffs in that round one playoff game by the Galaxy, and the Galaxy set up that game with LAFC, the El Trafico, in the playoffs. So a decent season overall for Minnesota, their first time in the playoffs, so being able to get over that hump is big for Minnesota and their fans as well. They made it to the final of the U.S. Open Cup, unfortunately to lose at Atlanta United in that game, but definitely a good season. I would say a good season for Minnesota, a stepping stone for the future for those guys. Make sure to subscribe down below. We're running a promotion where if we get 1,000 YouTube subscribers, we will do a drawing for a $250 Visa gift card to one of our social media followers. So all you got to do is subscribe below and then make sure to like us on Facebook, add us on Twitter or Instagram, and we will do that drawing. If we hit 1,000 followers by the end of the day on Sunday, March 1st, we will do a drawing for that $250 gift card. Let's talk a little bit about the players in and players out this offseason for Minnesota United. Some of the players in: Marlon Hairston, the midfielder, they picked up in the trade with Houston. We also have Gregory Rajat Singh off of waivers, a goalkeeper. I believe most recently he was with Orlando City. Then Tyler Miller, the number one goalkeeper, who was the keeper for LAFC. Now he's with Minnesota. A good trade there for Minnesota to be able to take Tyler Miller and get a really solid goalkeeper. Midfielder James Musa. Midfielder Ja'Cory Hayes, a trade from FC Dallas. Luis Amarilla on loan from Vélez Sarsfield there in Argentina. Raheem Edwards. Aaron Schoenfeld, a forward from Maccabi Tel Aviv. Jose Aja, a transfer from Union Española. Now, some of the players out: Rasmus Schuler, Colin Martin, Wilfred Mombe, Carter Manley, Ali Hemis Naganzi, Darwin Quintero, the first designated player in Minnesota history. Darwin Quintero was traded to the Houston Dynamo. Abu Danladi was taken in the expansion draft. Vito Minone, his loan expired. Angelo Rodriguez was bought out, and Wyatt Olmsberg was traded to the Chicago Fire for Raheem Edwards. So let's talk a little bit about the players in. Obviously, Luis Amarilla is probably the biggest signing of this offseason for Minnesota, probably the most important as well, and we will get into that a little bit later on. But also, Raheem Edwards, I think this is a very, very good trade for Minnesota. I personally am a TFC fan, and seeing him come up through TFC's system and really have a big role on that 2017 treble winning team, I think he has been kind of underused in the spots when he was moved over to Montreal through the expansion draft of LAFC, and then with Chicago Fire. He kind of had some disagreements with the coaching staffs and really hasn't played to his full potential, but I think he really could be a star for Minnesota United starting out as a depth piece and could even move into a starting job come the end of the season. He's got great speed, great control, a really strong player overall, so expect big things out of Raheem Edwards. Also, Aaron Schoenfeld, He's kind of, people are expecting big things from him, from Maccabi Tel Aviv. And then Marlon Hairston. Marlon Hairston is a solid MLS veteran piece, so expect to see him out in the pitch a lot for Minnesota as well. A lot of movement out for Minnesota, and I think that's what's really concerning most of the MLS pundits out there, is just some of the players that they lost from that team that made it to the playoffs for the first time and made it to the MLS or the U.S. Open Cup final against Atlanta. When you lose Rasmus Schuler, you lose Darwin Quintero, you lose Vito Minone, Abu Dunladi, Angelo Rodriguez. There's a lot of those pieces were very important pieces for that team last season. I understand that there were some issues with some of the players. They just weren't seeing eye to eye with management and the coaching staff. Also, some guys didn't work out. Get that, but that's kind of what scares a lot of people off that aren't diehard fans of Minnesota. Vito Minone had a great year. He kind of screwed himself looking for some wage demands there. Let's talk a little bit about the designated players. So first up is Jan Gregus, the Slovakian midfielder, 29 years old. This is his second season with Minnesota. Started 30 games last year. He's had 26 caps for the Slovakian national team. Defensive midfielder, but he can really transition into offense well. You hear his name a lot when you're watching a Minnesota United game. So that, kind of sums it up best. Grey Goose, and obviously with a name like that, there's lots of references there for Grey Goose vodka and whatnot. But you hear his name a lot. He's really involved in the play, kind of like a la Michael Bradley from a few years ago when he was at his best. Really strong player there in the prime of his career. A great piece, probably a huge, one of the biggest pieces for Minnesota United for sure. Also Thomas Chacon, the midfielder, the Uruguayan midfielder, 19 years old. He's on the youth national teams for Uruguay. 3 seasons in the Uruguayan top flight. He's listed as an attacking midfielder. So expect him to get more minutes at Minnesota United. So we should see his numbers kind of pick up on that front. He doesn't have a ton of goals from his Uruguayan time, but I expect to see this guy definitely score some goals and do some good assists as well. It's nice to see Minnesota United securing a young player that can be part of their future and really, hold that spot down for a few years, and then possibly get sold and moved on to a bigger club in Europe or something like that. Since MLS is kind of trending in the direction of becoming a selling league, especially with the new designated player rule that could take effect with the new CBA that was just ratified. You could see, a lot of guys that are coming over that are younger, under 23, that will, instead of going directly over to Europe, they come to MLS for 2 or 3 years, really, turn their game into, that superstar level, and then move on to Europe and, get sold for a big profit. So that's kind of where MLS is at right this moment. So it's nice to see Minnesota United doing that with Thomas Chacon, the 19-year-old midfield DP. So let's talk a little bit about the most important player for Minnesota United. It's hard to say because Minnesota doesn't really have that player that stands out as, that big name. There's no Chicharito like LA Galaxy or Carlos Vela or, a Josie Altidore for Toronto or, Joseph Martinez. There's none of those guys with the big names. So, could it be the defense? If you're not really putting it on one player, kind of most important position, maybe looking at the defense with Boxall, Ike Opara, Ozzy Alonso, kind of is that like D mid. Maybe the defense is that most important player. It could also be Luis Amarilla, the forward there from Paraguay. Minnesota needs goals. They really need goals. He's come in really hot form, and he was doing extremely well in the Paraguayan league where he just came from. Well, actually, the Ecuadorian top flight was the league's top scorer, which isn't a great league, but it's definitely it's a good South American league, and Minnesota needs to score. I mean, that was probably their one downfall last season was the goal scoring. The defense was solid. They have a lot of those guys back. Pretty much their whole starting back line and midfield there for the back is there from last season. So they really need to get those attacking pieces working, and Luis Amarilla could be that. So I'm going to go with Luis Amarilla as the most important player for Minnesota because if he does not perform and really start bagging a lot of goals and improve that offense there for Minnesota, it's going to be really hard for this team to make a playoff appearance if that's the case. So let's talk next about the breakout youngsters. So in all of our team previews, we've been kind of highlighting a few players that are young that could have a breakout season, really break into that starting 11 and make a name for themselves here in this season. So a lot of the time we get that information from Reddit, because with being a national podcast and covering MLS as a whole, we don't always get to watch every single game and know a lot about the academy kids and the younger homegrown players from each club. So we reached out to the fans there on Reddit. They gave us a couple names that people were high on. Oh, obviously, one of them was Thomas Chacon. Lots of talk on him being that nice young 19-year-old kid coming over from South America. So definitely excited about him. He should be a breakout youngster for sure and solidify himself there as a star for Minnesota. Also, a lot of talk about Mason Toye. So Mason Toye, he could be the top striker for Minnesota United. The kid has that much talent. He made some headlines last season, but now it's really the time for him to break out. He had a few immature moments as well last season that we all remember, but he's young, he's developing, it happens. He has had a couple USMNT caps for the youth sides with, I think, the U23 team. Maybe he's a late bloomer. Maybe he just flew under the radar. The kid's got talent, that's for sure. And for the sake of Minnesota, let's hope that it's the latter. He could break out this season, especially if the new signing comes in and doesn't do a whole lot, isn't scoring a lot of goals. Mason Toye could come in and get that chance, and if he could seize on that chance, he could be the best striker for Minnesota this season. So those are kind of the two young guys that could make an impact. Now let's talk a little bit about the starting 11, kind of a projected starting 11 for Minnesota. In goal, Tyler Miller, no doubt there. Regent Singh's not going to come in and start and take the starting job from him. So Miller in goal, Gasper, Boxall, Metanire, and Apara along the back. Metanire is a really, really good wing back. I expect him to probably be in the talk for Defender of the Year. And go check out our MLS season preview video. I'll put a link up here in the YouTube video to go check that video out. You might like what you hear about Romain Metanire and what I think he'll be doing this season. So, a good solid back line. Grey Goose, Alonso, Lode, Molino, and Finlay up as in the midfield and kind of in that, a 4-2-3-1, kind of maybe even a 4-5-1 look, and then Amarilla up top. So, I wouldn't be surprised to see kind of a 4-4-2 or a 4-4-1-1 with Mason Toye and Amarilla getting some minutes. I could see Adrian Heath kind of flirt with that kind of attack if necessary. Overall, a strong 11, right? A strong starting 11 there. But it all really depends on Amarilla. Ethan Finlay, has to have another decent season. He's kind of been a good, solid MLS vet that's going to give you a consistent turnout every season. He's not going to light the world on fire. Overall, I expect some decent things out of Minnesota. So let's talk a little bit about our predictions. So My predictions for Minnesota United is kind of going with a ceiling and a floor. So ceiling, obviously, Amaria comes in, scores tons of goals, not a lot of injury issues, some good players, a big signing maybe in the summertime for Minnesota. And, I could see this team kind of doing what they did last year, a fourth spot in the Western Conference, get that home playoff game there at Allianz Field, which is just an absolutely amazing atmosphere. That I really thought would pull them through last season in that playoff game. Unfortunately, it didn't. So if they get that chance again, they, hopefully that great stadium will and atmosphere from those fans will help that team get through. Now, if, a floor for Minnesota, the aging defense, and there's a lack of offense like there was last season. The defense doesn't hold up. It could see them regressing below the playoff line, kind of ending in that, that maybe 9th or 10th spot in the Western Conference and missing out on the playoffs again. So, unfortunately, I see the latter happening there. I see this team kind of falling out a bit, not making the playoffs. They've lost too many pieces from last season and really haven't brought in enough reinforcements, in my opinion, to get into the playoffs in a stacked Western Conference. I mean, you have a lot of teams. You obviously have your LAFCs, LA Galaxy. Those teams are there. They're really solid. They're spending tons of money. You got Sporting Kansas City's rejuvenated. San Jose, Colorado, really good teams with good coaches. Portland, Seattle. The Western Conference is stacked. So it's going to be really hard to get into the playoffs. Hopefully Minnesota can get it done. I'll be pulling for the Loons, but we will see. The first game is Sunday, March 1st. At the Portland Timbers. So definitely a tough start to the season for Minnesota, having to travel to Providence Park, one of the better atmospheres in MLS, kind of right there with Minnesota. So that could be a tough game for Minnesota. Check out my MLS picks and predictions video for Week 1, and I will tell you how I think this game will go. And make sure to subscribe down below to not miss any of our awesome American soccer content. Thank you for joining us for this Minnesota United team preview. Good luck to the Loons this season. Fans, make sure to bring it like you have, over the last couple of seasons at TCF Bank Stadium, as well as at new Allianz Field. And hopefully Minnesota will be singing Wonderwall many, many times. Good luck and enjoy this awesome 2020 MLS season getting underway in a few days.